Hallelujah. Let's give all glory to God. Let us bless each other. Be at peace. You're the missionaries to save the world. You shall take possession of their land. Thank you for the graceful praise. We have a reason to be at peace. That is because God has called us as an evangelist to stop the disasters of this age. The word that God has given us, God will fulfill it. May this time be the greatest time. It might be a short time, but may you receive God's absolute grace. I have told you once before. And there was a salesman in the Joseon dynasty. And this salesman's name was Im Sang-ok. He said, business isn't leaving behind profits, it's leaving behind people. This is a gospel-like thought. Right now, we're living in an age where we're losing people. They're having relationship with other people for their own profits. And right now, they're meeting people and losing people because of their profits and benefits. And if you see this in the old ancient book in China, is that a year's plan is nothing like planting a crop. A 10-year plan is a plan like planting a tree. And a lifetime plan is nothing more than like planting people. We harvest our crops in a year. And when we plant a tree, it might take 10 years for the tree to grow where the birds can flock and rest. But there's no other greater plan than leaving behind people, and that's an eternal plan. And today's title is The Greatest Answers and Blessings. God said, go and make disciples. If you are the person that held on to the covenant of world evangelization, then you will leave behind disciples. And that is when you yourself become a disciple and you become a person that leaves disciples. Then how is it right now? People are not interested in raising disciples. And that is why the age where the churches are closing their doors has come. And it's same for the Europe, Korea, and America. The American churches have lost to the Freemasons. They're saying, where is God? And even till now, they're pointing fingers at the church. Why is that? And the pastors, they do not have strength. And right now, the believers are being shaken and wandering, and they're falling into conflicts. And right now, our prosperity, our next generation is facing the age of disaster. And right now, all of the land is suffering from spiritual problems. Why is that? That is because they have lost hold of the most important and the greatest answer and blessing that is leaving behind the disciples. Many people say, how can I become a disciple? How was Elijah who raised the greatest disciple? It said, if you see in James 5:17, he was a subjected person. And you can see that Elijah was also a person. How was it? If you see First Kings, you can see he has done great works in verse 18 or chapter 18. And you can see that if you see in First Kings chapter 19, he done great works, but he was underneath the juniper tree and said, I cannot go on any further. But you can see that he lived a life that left behind the greatest disciples. And the disciple that Elijah has left behind was Elisha. And that was the beginning of the disciple movement. And he did the works of the Dothan movement where he won without fighting. And you can see that the king said to this person, or Elijah, Father. This means it doesn't matter about our standards and our power. And when we go inside of the work of God, that is when we are able to leave behind disciples and we become the glorious disciple. We must become the correct disciple and we must leave behind correct disciple. Why does a church exist? What is the reason for the existence of pastors, lay leaders, and the church workers? You can see Jesus has raised up 70 lay workers. And if you see Paul, you can see 24 disciples were placed. If there is a reason for me living, it's the reason as becoming a disciple and is leaving behind disciples. If you have not become a disciple and if you have not left behind disciple, there is no reason for you to die. When Moses raised up the disciples, Joshua, that is when God took the life of Moses. And when Elisha was raised by Elijah, that is when God took away Elijah. Then nobody in here has the reason to die. And we must leave behind. We must become the disciple, and we must leave behind the disciples, and we must make our next generation and our prosperities a disciple. if you do not make them the disciple, it is same as throwing our prosperity into the mouths of Satan. And Abraham gave birth to Isaac at the age of 100, but he wasn't just a kid. In the Mount Moriah, this covenant was given to Isaac. But you can see in the Bible, the blessings that Isaac received is because of Abraham. What does this signify? It wasn't just the son Isaac, he was the disciple Isaac. Jacob became a person that raised 12 tribes. And how was Joseph? It wasn't because of his characteristics that he would receive blessings. Because when he held on to the covenant to save the world and became a disciple, that is when he received the blessing to save the world. And for our parents, if you know the realistic parts of the field, then you have no choice but to raise your children up as a disciple. And this is how we must live on, and how the church and our family and our church must live. And I'll tell you in three points. What kind of age is it right now? Right now, it is the age where disaster is continuously occurring. Why is disaster coming? Because the gospel is becoming disappeared. Then who are the people who are disciples? The true disciple is the disciple who proclaim this correct, accurate gospel. We know the word in Matthew 16:13 through 19. Many of the people did not know Christ the correct way. That is why Jesus asked the disciples, "Who do you say I am?" And that is when the disciple Peter answered, "Jesus, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And when Jesus, who received that confession, gave blessing to Peter, and says, "About Simon Peter, you are blessed." What is the real blessing? What is the blessing that we have received in our life? Many people lose hold of this and they're falling into failure because they do not know the blessing of this gospel. That is why they are losing to the field, and that is why they are not becoming a disciple. What is a true blessing? Is it money? Is it fame? Is it knowledge? Is it health? That is just the result where a blessed people receive. That is something that even demons could give. If a person that has not received blessing have these kind of things, then that's a curse. If the person that do not have this gospel, when they have money, what would happen? They will just try to fill up their emptiness, and they'll fall into corruption, and they will fall into eternal curses. If a person that have not been blessed have health, they'll do something else with that health. A person that has been blessed and with the gospel must have money and health. Then, if not, then as a humankind, we have no choice but to leave behind fruit of evil. And Jesus said, Simon Peter, you are blessed. What did Simon Peter confess for him to be blessed? Knowing Jesus, that is the Christ, is itself a blessing. What is the mystery of Christ? It is the name of Christ is being set free from the disaster and the curses that will come, and you're being set free from that. And this disaster and curses will be relayed to your children. Being set free from this is only the name of Jesus Christ. That is why knowing Christ itself is a blessing. And the name of Christ is where you are set free from, and you're coming out of all of your destiny and darkness and the authority of hell. If you see in Romans 8:1-2, it says, for the law of spirit of life has set you free in the Christ Jesus from law of sin and death. And we're living inside of the gospel that God has given us. And the people who know this is the people who live inside of the name of Christ. If you see in Ephesians 1:3-5, it says, but blessed be the God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us in the Christ with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places. And to those who know this blessing and who are inside of this blessing, we call them the rock. And upon that rock, God will raise His church. And the gates of Hades will never overcome it. And you will become the person that have the keys to heaven. And the people who have this mystery are the disciples. We don't know this by just our physical and flesh. It is only through God we know this. And this Christ must become only inside of our lives. Jesus showed the disciples on the Mount Transfiguration. It says Matthew 17:1-9. It says only Jesus was left. Disciples only see Jesus Christ. The people who are disciples are the people who know that even Moses and Abraham was inside of Jesus Christ. Moses and Elijah. We can see Moses is a representative of the Old Testament, and Elijah was a person that signifies the New Testament. And it means they're all inside of Jesus Christ. Moses and Elijah, they're all inside of Jesus Christ. We must only hold on to Christ. That is it. And as evidence that He is Christ, in Matthew 28:1-20, he was crucified on the cross and resurrected. And that is why we do not have anything to worry about. We just hold on to the name of Christ and we just wait. And when we hold on to only the name of Christ and wait, and God will raise us up and give us the evidence to raise us up as a witness. To the person who grabs hold of to Christ, God's kingdom will be upon them. And all of the other things that might seem like a problem, God will give it to you as evidence and raise you up as a witness. And to those who know this mystery are the disciples. To those who know the gospel are the disciples. If you really know what this gospel is, then you will become the disciple to change other people. If you see Matthew 4:19, it says, follow me, and I will make you fishermen of men. If you follow after the Lord Christ, then He will give you the strength to change other people. And we want to change some kind of people, and we want to change the social things inside of the world. But if you are just inside of this Christ and we follow after the Lord, then we are able to change them. The changing that person isn't something else. It is following after the Lord, and God will give us the strength to change other people. Those who follow after Jesus, the situations and the surroundings was not a problem. When Joseph went to the house of Potiphar, because of Joseph, the Potiphar's house was revived. And when we went to prison, he met with the high governor officials. And when Joseph stood in front of King Pharaoh, the Pharaoh saw that Jehovah God was with Joseph. And if you see in Exodus, when the Israelites were coming out of Egypt, there was 10 disasters. And if you see the conversation between Moses and King Pharaoh, you can see that King Pharaoh acknowledged that God was with Moses. As you're listening to this message right now, you must be able to find that God is with you and receive that spiritual strength. King Saul tried to kill David, and he brought 3,000 army men. But this King Saul saw David and said, "Oh, you are the person of God." If you have this time to concentrate upon God, then people around you will know through you that God exists. If you see in Romans 16, there are people who helped Paul. They even gave up their lives to help Paul. And Priscilla and Aquila became a protector of Paul. That is because through Paul, they saw that God is alive. And you can see in Corinthians 2:2, Paul confessed that I will only chase after the things of Christ. And how much we concentrate upon God and Christ, the people around you will start to change. And I bless you in the name of Christ that you have these blessings. Second, what kind of people are the blessing? Or disciples? Do you know where Satan is trying to attack at the very end? If you see in Revelations, it says the dragon was furious and went back to the woman. And to fight with them, at the end, Satan will attack the church. Then who are the people that are the disciples? To those who know the church correctly, God will raise as disciples. If you see in Acts 20:28, God has gave His blood to buy this church. That's how important churches are. That is why to the people who know these blessings and raise the church, God will give everything upon the individual, the family, and the churches. And I will prophesy, those people who do not know the blessing of the church will absolutely crumble. And if you see Eli and Ananias and Sapphira, if we can say churches like this or that, like that, but Jesus, the Lord said, He said, I will raise my church. When Christ becomes our master, that is when Jesus said, I will raise my church upon your rock. And if we have this, people we cannot overcome the family and the world and all the problems that are rising right now. That is why the Lord is with us and has given us the evidence. And this means that God has given us or is building His church upon our rock. And it says the gates of Hades will never overcome it. And look at the biblical history and look at the history of the churches. No matter how great of this gates of Hades is, they can never overcome us. Because the promise that God has given us will be absolutely fulfilled. Even today, our choir praised. The covenant that God has given us, God will fulfill. And the churches the correct churches who hold on to Christ, they have the keys to the heaven. It means that God will give us the answers of blessings where not one word that we speak will fall to the ground. It means all of them will be answered. And this is the only way to block the disasters will come, and that is the true church. Enjoying the Genesis 3:15, the offspring of woman is a church. And whatever the disaster we meet, the mystery to live is the church. If you see in Genesis 6:14, all who went inside of the ark lived. And whatever the problem may be, we are able to solve. That is the church. And through the Exodus 3:18, it says, and even coming out of all of our captivity and darkness is the church. And that is why we must become the church where we only confess of God. And no matter how big the church is, no matter how many people flock to that church, but if the only name that can block disaster, that is Christ, is not proclaimed, and then that church will just become a playground for Satan. Right now, the churches are not proclaiming this Christ. They're holding on to things that is not the gospel. That is why churches have no choice but to crumble. Why is that? The Lord said that He will raise His church, but how can that church crumble? That is because when God sees it, He sees it unworthy. That is why He crumbles it. Do not fall into things that is not the gospel. No matter how great it is, no matter how good it is, if that is not the gospel, then you have no choice but to crumble. And later on, if you see it, that will just become a loss to you. And lastly, the third. Who are the disciples? The people who know the relationship, the mystery of relationship with people are the disciple. Because they lose hold of gospel and they lose hold of the blessing of the church, that is why the relationship with other people, problems come. The more we know the gospel and accurately we know and we enjoy God's blessings, then we know all of our meetings are blessings. It's the communions of saints. Do you think if you just live your walk of faith good, then is that it? No, that's not it. God has called us into this one place. If you, even great renowned people and even other people, they will all come together and they will become one. That is the church. And one day I said this, I held on to this Christ or this gospel and I alone came. But right now, we must live all together. If you do not see the plan of God inside of other people, then great problems will come. Because we cannot do world evangelization by me alone holding on to Christ. That is why when we're living, as we live together, we must see the plan of God inside of other people. And this is a communion of saints. And I told you in the introduction, even the church goers are self-centered. And that is why even the grace that they receive it self-centered. You can see that they do not acknowledge other people. That's not it. The more you know the gospel and the more you enjoy God's blessings, then inside of the group and inside of other people, that there is God's plan. And we came into that plan of God. Then all the meetings that you have, all the situations you face, they're all in God's plan. If you're inside of God's plan, then all the people that you meet and all the situation you face, they're all inside of the plan of God. And I bless you in the name of Christ that you know this. And there are renowned people and there are people that are not. But it doesn't matter. If you see in Acts 9:36 to 43, you can see, or if you see in the Bible, Barnabas brought Saul and did team ministry with him. The people who are renowned and people who are not, they're all inside of the mystery of God. And inside of that, the disciples are hidden. Many people fall into failure because of relationship problems. But the 7 remnants, because of the relationship, they saved that age. And that is the posture of the summit. What is the posture of the summit? It's not being deceived by the situations and problems. The posture of the summit is not being hindered. You can see Joseph, who went to as a slavery, he could have been furious and could have resented, but he didn't. He was not deceived. And this is his posture. And through Moses, Moses also faced problems. And he was framed by his own people. And that is why he ran to the land of Midian, and he could have fallen into despair. But you can see that time became the greatest time where he received the greatest answer. Isaiah totally crumbled, failed. And it said, you can see that all will fail. But if you see in Isaiah 6:1-12, he held on to the new covenant, and that is the remnant. And the early church was framed as a heresy. But because they knew the gospel, the relationship problem was not a problem to them. Early churches had a lot of problems. But because of that, rather they received the greater blessings. And this is the posture of the summit. It's not being hindered by problems. It's not being deceived by the problems. This is the posture of the summit. If you see in 1 Peter 3:8-12, don't curse the ones that curse you. Rather, give them blessings. That is because God has given us blessings. And God said, we do not have to receive scars, and we do not have to fall into conflicts. Because The eyes see the righteous, and the ears hear. Oh, God is alive. Those who are believers or not, all of them, God is watching over them. And that is why finish your scars. Because I am the master of my life, that is why we give scars and we receive scars. Because I am the master of my life, that is why we fall into conflicts. Really, remember the 1 Peter 3:12. It says, "For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer, but the face of the Lord is against those who do evil." Remember this. And if you see him, 1 Thessalonica 5:12. Or 1 Thessalonians. If you see in verse 14, it says, "And we urge you to it says be ideal and encourage the faint-hearted." We can just speak rashly about other people, but that can make them fall into discouragement. And how can we know that how that one person will become? If you see in verse 15, it says, "See that no one repays anyone evil for evil." Are you the person that is saved? Then you are the person that is inside of the plan of God. And the plan of all plans are you are inside of God's plan. I'll come to the close of my words. Do you know the greatest age of the Old Testament and the New Testament? And if you see the 1 Kings 2:1-11, when Elijah was raised, and that's the Old Testament. And that is for the New Testament, Matthew 28:16-20. What does this mean? The disciple, they have the most interest, the greatest interest from God, and you are preparing. And we are the main interest of God. And to those who have the correct gospel, God will place the disciples. And God will work. And the problems that we face, God will bless through that. And what is the greatest answer that is guaranteed to us in the future? And that is the raising the correct church. No matter how great of a church that we are, if we do not raise a disciple, then that is meaningless. And if no matter how great of the church or how big the great church is, if you do not have the disciple, if a wind blows, and it will crumble. And the person who knows, the disciple who knows the gospel, and disciple that know the church, and the disciple that know the relationship, and become the greatest disciple that realize these blessings. And Jesus Christ, we give you thanks. And let us become the disciples that